When you start MIStudio, you're presented with the main window, which includes the project panel, the property window, the palette, and the design window. The design window is where you build your graphical display that will ultimately become the HTML5 web view for the project. If I look at the palette, I find that the palette now contains a selection of objects that are suitable for building a graphical display. We have basic components, we have additional graphical components for such things as images, image support, and various mimic support, as well as tables. High performance HMI components, more mimic components for pipes and valves and arrows and various other things, as well as such things as charting and alarming. To use these components, I simply click one on the palette and I put it into my window. And doing this, I can repeat this until I have built the display that I need. To activate these components, each design window has what we call a diagram window associated with it. The diagram window is where you build the logic associated with any application. And I can take my component and I can move that to the diagram window. And we see that now I have a representation of my component in both windows. As soon as I do this, the palette changes from being graphical type components to being logic type components. The first panel is simulated data sources. I also have a complete suite of PLC connectors, database components, IoT protocols, support for the cloud, and various logic components that allow me to perform operations on data. Similar to the design window, I simply click a component on the palette and I drop it onto the screen. Now I can connect this to another piece of logic and I'll see it displayed on my design window, live in real time. Once you have the hang of just connecting this logic together, the rest is simple. If I want to do something with this, such as just multiply it by a number, I simply take a component off the palette. This is a scalar. I can multiply it by 2. I then connect, instead of directly to the enunciator, to the scalar, and then to the enunciator. And now I see the value multiplied by 2. Building up from this simple idea, I can create very sophisticated screens. Always of interest is databases. And here I can simply take database components and drop them onto the screen. This is a simple embedded database, the SQLite database. And all I need to do is provide this with a database name and it'll start creating a disk-based file for me. But what I want to do is store some data in here. And for that we have a component we call the triggered historical. The triggered historical I simply associate with my database connection. I'm going to allow it to create the tables because I want it to control the schema. We'll give it a table name. And then I can start saving data to my database directly. The way I do this is I hook the output of one of my components into the input of the database. And let's put another component on the screen. So now I have a simple counter that will count up. I'll add that in there. The names of these components, each component has a name, will become the column name in the table. So if I wanted a more intelligent name, I should put it in here. The triggered historical saves data whenever it is triggered. And that can be on an alarm, so you get a snapshot of the system at a particular point in time. Or we can do it on a time base. This is commonly the way to perform this. And we'll save data every 5 seconds. To avoid problems with live data, MIStudio starts out in simulation mode and won't save data to a database, won't communicate with the PLC until we go from simulated to live mode. As soon as we do that, we'll see that we're saving data. So now we're populating our database with a column, a table that has a column for the current time and the values of these two components. So let's add another screen here. And onto my screen, I'll put some components so that we can see what's in the database. Let's start with a chart. And we'll also put in here a table so we can see both a tabular and a graphical form of this data. So now what I'm going to do is, as we did before, I'm going to move these to the diagram window. And once again, I'm going to go to my database tab. And now instead of taking the triggered historical for saving data, I'm going to take the raw lookup so that I can read data back from that database. Again, I'm going to connect this to my database representation. And I'm going to put in my SQL statement telling it what data we're going to pull back. And then I simply connect these to my two components. And we'll see I have no data because I haven't yet triggered the read of the database. To do that, I need to provide something to trigger it. And again, this could be a component from the screen. It could be done on a time base. It could be done when a certain event occurs in the application. But here I'm going to put in a button again. So now I have the ability to trigger my read, and as soon as I trigger that, I should see the values in the chart and in the table. If I try and click on any of these components to make the button work, I clearly drag and drop it instead of being able to click it. So for that, we have what we call the test pane, which is a pane where I can actually push this button. And as soon as I do that, I see the chart and I see my tabular data on the screen. So very quickly, I can save data to a database, and it comes with a timestamp and the values, and I can read it back and display it either in a chart or in a table.